Tonight, we will pursue together a puzzle that has occupied the world for 500 years. Can a man really foresee the collapse of the Twin Towers centuries in advance? How do we distinguish false prophecies from real ones? From September 11th to Hitler, from COVID-19 to fears of 2025. Why do we rush to the same name in every crisis? Michel de Nostradamus, or as we know him, Nostradamus. Prophet, charlatan, or someone completely different. Don't forget to like our video and subscribe to the channel. Also, write in the comments where you follow us from. If you're ready, let's embark on a journey where reality and legend intersect. In 16th century Europe, while the winds of the Renaissance had not yet reached most of the continent, the shadow of the Dark Ages still weighed heavily on society. Inquisition courts spread fear, witch hunts burned innocent people, plague epidemics emptied cities. In this period, when superstition ruled alongside knowledge, medicine, and astrology, science and sorcery were intertwined. In such a time, in December of 1503, Michel de Nostradamus was born in the town of Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, in the Provence region of France. His family had belonged to the Jewish faith for many years, but had been forced to convert due to Catholic pressure. This forced conversion left deep marks on the family's soul, and being forced to hide their past created an ambiguity in Michel's character as well. In the family history, there were figures engaged in science, especially medicine and astrology. This was influential in Michel developing a deep curiosity about nature, stars, and diseases from childhood. According to rumors, his grandfather was the one who taught little Michel Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. He also received basic knowledge about astrology and natural philosophy from him. Of course, this is rumor, because official sources do not confirm this part. In his youth, Michel first studied in Avignon, then began studying medicine at the University of Montpellier. However, an event here cut his academic career short. University records indicate that Michel was expelled from school due to his past with pharmacy. At that time, pharmacists were not considered equivalent to physicians, and it was forbidden for medical students to engage in pharmacy. This event deprived him of an official doctor title, but did not prevent him from developing his knowledge and skills. By the end of the 1520s, France was writhing in the grip of the plague epidemic. The Black Death had engulfed continental Europe for the second time, leaving people in desperation. Neither the church's prayers worked, nor the traditional medicine of the time. Young Michel de Nostradamus, expelled from Montpellier Medical Faculty, began traveling the country as a wandering physician in the midst of this fear. And here's the noteworthy point. Nostradamus's methods of fighting the plague were extraordinary for his time. He brought patients together with fresh air, recommended they bathe frequently, used natural antiseptics like lavender. He stayed away from bloodletting or leeches, practices common in those years. These approaches were contrary to the framework drawn by church-supported medicine. The general belief of the period was that the plague was God's wrath, and therefore should be treated with spiritual methods. However, Nostradamus was producing practical solutions guided by observation-based intuition. According to a rumor, during a plague epidemic in a rural village, Michel had houses disinfected with lime, had the dead buried as quickly as possible, and had all clothing used by patients burned. These measures were almost revolutionary for that period. These practices, which today lie at the foundation of modern infectious disease science, were seen in those years not as scientific, but as intuitive decisions. But they worked, and this gradually increased his reputation. During this period, he married, had a wife and 2 children. However, this happiness did not last long. In 1534, when the plague spread again, this time it struck his own family. His wife and children lost their lives despite all his efforts. Michel was left alone with the deep regret and grief of not being able to save them. This event is thought to have fed his subsequent introversion and dark premonitions about the future. Life went on, and in the year 1547, he remarried a woman named Anne Ponsard. This second marriage made him taste family love again. Nostradamus seemed to have finished his reckoning with fate, but prophecies and stories attributed to him would never leave him. In these years, some sources contain records that rumors emerged among the people that Nostradamus made prophecies. However, there is an important point to note here. There is no concrete data about these in the correspondence and letters of that period. These rumors were largely spread by biographers of later periods. Nevertheless, his power of observation, his success in predicting the behavior pattern of the epidemic, and his occasional use of mystical expressions transformed him in the minds of the people into a sage or prescient figure beyond doctoring. According to some of his contemporaries, the secret of Michel's success was not in medical intuition, but in the ability to analyze the position of the stars. In those years, astrology was an inseparable part of medicine. It was common to establish a connection between the movements of planets and people's health. Michel de Nostradamus was not foreign to this tradition either. Notes that he interpreted the course of diseases by looking at birth charts would be seen in texts he wrote in later periods. This period was a breaking point for him, a man going back and forth between science and belief, observation and intuition, life and death. He was now perceived as a spiritual guide, but at the same time had become a suspicious figure in the eyes of the church. The end of the 1540s were times when a man working in deep solitude in southern France bent over paper by candlelight at night. This was no longer a physician fighting diseases, but a pen wrestling with the secrets of the future. Les prophécies, the first version of the Prophecies book, was published in 1555. The book contained 353 prophecy quatrains. It was written in Latin letters, difficult to understand, sometimes anagrammed, in a style that sometimes blended different languages. The reason for this coded narrative was very clear: the Church and the Inquisition. Open prophecy meant damnation. The religious authorities of the period saw everything that implied information being received from a power other than God as heresy. Nostradamus had to both protect himself and choose a cunning way. He established a system woven with ambiguous expressions, undated but carrying intuitive wholeness when carefully examined. According to a rumor, the reason Nostradamus wrote his prophecies so complexly was not only fear of the Inquisition. It was also a mystical belief that the secrets of the future should only be understood by those worthy. The first publication of the Prophecies book quickly caused great repercussions. The book sold rapidly in many regions in France, and handwritten copies reached different parts of Europe. The people not only sought clues about the future, but also began to see their own fate in those quatrains. However, reactions among the elites and intellectuals of the period were mixed. Some argued that he was a mind beyond his time, while others evaluated the ambiguity of the texts, not as prophecy but as word games. Nevertheless, Les Prophéties managed to attract the attention of one of the most powerful figures of the period, French Queen Catherine de' Medici. A ruler interested in astrology, open-minded to occult sciences, Catherine wanted to meet with Nostradamus personally as soon as she became aware of his prophecies. This meeting took place in 1556. According to rumors, he made prophecies about the future of the Queen's children, and made some implications, especially about the rise of Henry IV. After this meeting, Nostradamus's reputation increased rapidly. In the year 1558, he published the second volume of his prophecies. The prophecies, which would reach a total of 942 quatrains, had become a mirror held up to the spirit of the period. Each line opened the door to a mysterious future. However, there was a noteworthy detail. Nostradamus had not given a direct date in any of his prophecies. Day, year, even century were often not clearly stated. Instead, symbols, zodiac signs, celestial events, and historical references were used. This both made the texts difficult to interpret and made them independent of time. Some historians interpret this situation as Nostradamus's conscious strategy, because the more general and timeless a prophecy is, the more periods it can be adapted to. During this period, the claim was also made that some of the quatrains he wrote came true. Especially in 1559, French King Henry II, receiving a lance blow to his eye during a tournament and dying, brought whispers of Nostradamus's prophecy came true among the people. The quatrain does not contain a direct name, but is full of images like, "The young lion will defeat the old lion, will pierce his eyes in a golden cage." Although the timing and similarity of the event strengthen this claim, whether this is a definite prediction is still debated among historians. The impact of these prophecies was so great that Nostradamus almost became a living myth. The doors of royal palaces opened to him. He was called the man who reads the language of the stars, watched with both admiration and fear. But behind all this rise lay historical knowledge, symbol literacy, and a multifaceted intellectual accumulation. Nostradamus was like a strategist who constructed the future by reading the data of his age beyond his intuitions, and the fruits of this strategy made him the author of history's most debated prophecy book. But the questions were just beginning. Was the future really being told in these quatrains, or were people seeing their own fates in those lines? In the modern period, very serious problems have emerged regarding Nostradamus's prophecies, especially fake quatrains attributed to him after major events overshadow his real works. The most common of these were these lines that emerged after the September 11th attacks. "Two steel birds will fall from the sky over the metropolis. The sky will burn at the 45th parallel. Fire approaches the great new city. Immediately a great flame will rise." This quatrain spread throughout the world, with the perception of Nostradamus knew, swept the internet. Yet such a quatrain is found neither in the original book, dated 1555, nor in later expanded editions. It is a fake text, written in the modern period. Similarly, words like, "There will be a great noise in the city of God," "Two brothers will be divided by chaos," were written experimentally by a university student in 1997. That is, it is fabricated from start to finish. However, after September 11th, it was brought up again, becoming the pioneer of the fake prophecy frenzy. After George W. Bush won the presidential election in 2000, words like, In the 12th month of the millennium, the village fool will come forward in the house of the great power, were presented as if they belonged to Nostradamus, even though they were a satire text written to criticize Bush. Even in 2012, when Psy's Gangnam Style song swept the world, lines like "The calm will come from the morning," "9 circles of the dancing horse," written entirely by internet users for entertainment purposes, were said Nostradamus knew this too. This is why there is something important that everyone who wants to understand Nostradamus needs to know. Every poetic word, every metaphor, does not belong to him. Real quatrains are documented, numbered, and of Latin origin. The others are just people's efforts to legitimize their own fears with a name. And this effort has never ended for centuries. A similar situation exists regarding the world wars. None of Nostradamus's prophecies directly contain concepts defining that period, such as 1914, Austria, Serbia. Only in some prophecies are there images like fire-spewing cars, iron monsters, war in the sky. Although these images evoke tanks, warplanes, or bombs, they again do not contain clear names and dates. Some historians argue that Nostradamus is skipping, especially major events like world wars, actually strengthens not his prophecy, but his poet and observer identity. Because the texts are only interpreted to match those events after they have occurred. The claims about Hitler are completely false. The word Hister in the claimed quatrain is not Adolf Hitler, but the name given to the Danube River on 16th century maps. Danubius Hister, or simply Hister, was used as a geographical term at that time. Nostradamus never directly used the name Hitler in any quatrain. This claim only turned into a fiction arising from sound similarity centuries later. Moreover, this quatrain was deliberately spread by Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels in the 1940s. The image of even the great prophet knew the Führer's coming in advance was created so that the morale of the people would not be broken in the war. Not only in Germany, but in Allied countries, the same quatrain was rewritten with different interpretations, presented as a sign announcing that Hitler would be destroyed. The same applies to the year 2025. When Les Prophéties was published in 1555, it contained 353 quatrains. Later, this number reached 942. In none of these verses does it say 2025, neither a month name, nor a calendar, nor an event. But as in every period, this year too, people are placing their own fears in those lines. The year had just begun, but people were already talking about its end. Newspapers were asking the question, could Nostradamus have foreseen 2025? According to some, yes, because a great object would descend from the sky, the economy would collapse, a great war would break out. This cycle seems to continue forever. At every moment of crisis, at every major change, in every period of uncertainty, people return to those old prophecies and look for signs of their own times. The same thing happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. General expressions like, great disease will come from the east, will engulf the whole world, were adapted to the pandemic. Yet throughout history, epidemics have always followed trade routes, spreading from Asia to Europe. This geographical pattern is certain and not paranormal. The Nostradamus phenomenon actually reflects the depths of human psychology. People are in search of confidence in the face of uncertainty, and prophecies meet this need for confidence. Having a prediction about the future gives people a sense of control. Especially in times of crisis, this need increases even more. Modern psychology explains this situation as confirmation bias. The human mind tends to seek evidence confirming its own beliefs. People ignore thousands of prophecies that didn't come true and remember only those that did. This selective memory feeds the Nostradamus legend. There is also the problem of retrospective interpretation. Ambiguously written prophecies can be interpreted to fit them after events occur. The Nostradamus industry also keeps this phenomenon alive. A multi-million-dollar sector revolves around him. Books, documentaries, consulting services. Commercial interests ensure that prophecies are constantly interpreted and kept current. Each new interpretation, each new book, makes the legend even bigger. The internet age has also added a new dimension to the Nostradamus phenomenon. Now people from all over the world can discuss prophecies, develop new interpretations, share their own theories. Videos explaining Nostradamus prophecies on YouTube get millions of views. On social media, fake prophecies go viral after every major event. Although what Nostradamus wrote has been discussed under the heading of prophecy for centuries, in reality what shapes these texts is not only mystical intuition. When his texts are examined carefully, history, politics, war strategies, public psychology, and the diplomatic equations of the period are also seen between the lines. This is why some researchers see him not so much as a prophet, but as a strategist with analytical intelligence, even a social scientist. The 16th century was a turbulent period. While reform movements divided Europe in two, the Ottomans pressed westward. The New World was discovered. Economic crises drove the people to rebellion. All of this was within Nostradamus's field of observation. He was also a traveling physician, an intellectual, a man of the people. It is also known that Nostradamus often drew inspiration from the Holy Book, especially the Book of Daniel and the Revelation section in the Old Testament are important sources of his symbolic language. Images like 7 seals, red horse, sky of fire find similar place in his texts. However, Nostradamus's difference is that he uses these symbols by blending them with current political tensions. According to some sources, when Nostradamus wrote prophecies, he would spread out the largest European maps of the period before him, examine cities, palaces, border conflicts, one by one. This is recorded as a rumor, but the geographical consistency in the texts supports this claim. That is, behind the lines, there is both a mystical intuition and a concrete geopolitical reading. When all these come together, what emerges is someone who can sense the flow of his age in advance, who can read historical patterns. This is why many historians evaluate his prophecies as a kind of analytical prediction. Similar to the scenario analysis used by today's strategy experts, he also established a language through probabilities, poetized possibilities. And in this way, he made it possible for each generation to find its own disaster in his lines. Perhaps this was Nostradamus's true mastery. Nostradamus died on July 2nd, 1566. It is rumored that one night he told his assistant, "Tomorrow morning you will not see me again." And indeed, he was found dead the next morning. According to some, this was his last prophecy, but actually, this was a man who carefully observed every day. He lived also analyzing himself. What's interesting is this. Nostradamus had not died alone. His second wife, Anne, was in the same house with him, but this part of history was generally not told, because the owner of the prophecies was always described as alone and mysterious. On Nostradamus's tombstone It is written in Latin, "Here lie the bones of Michel Nostradamus, the only man worthy of the judgment of all mortals. He who with an almost divine pen wrote the future events of the world from the movements of the stars. He lived 62 years, 6 months, and 17 days. He died in Salon in 1566. O future generations, do not envy his peace. Today his quatrains are still being read. When wars break out, when fire is seen in the sky, when great leaders die, humanity returns to his lines, because prophecy sometimes represents not truth, but only the search for meaning. And Nostradamus has been the mirrors of this search. Perhaps the most accurate question is this: did Nostradamus see the future, or are we constructing the future within the past? He did not see the future. He sensed the future. He did not write the future. He wrote how the future was thought of. Actually, he told humanity about humanity.